very excited, making his CHGO Bears debut here and what's going to be pretty much weekly appearances between now and the NFL Draft. Our AllCity NFL Draft analyst, Fran Duffy. If you are not already following his work, you must. You must be a CHGO diehard because he is going to be giving us, he's going to take what we've already done the last few years with the Bears 100 to a completely different level with prospects. He's already done, I think, triple the amount that we had last year.
He's going to top my work?
Yes. You did, what, 2 prospects of the 100 last year?
I think I got 4 done.
Okay. Well, I think Fran already has 250. Fran, welcome. We're so excited to have you, man.
Adam, what's going on, guys? I'm excited to join up with you guys every week here on the show, but obviously a lot to discuss with the big news here in the last 48 hours.
Well, Fran knows ball, so before we get into some of these draft prospects, just give us your initial thoughts about this hire for the Bears. You know the personnel on the team, how you think it's all going to fit together.
Yeah, look, I mean, whenever a guy is named a head coach for the first time, you don't know with certainty how it's going to work. That said, I mean, this was as good of a hire as the Chicago Bears could have possibly made, right? Because obviously the priority number one is to make, you want to put Caleb Williams in the best situation for long-term success. And what Ben Johnson has done in Detroit over the last few years has created an incubator for Jared Goff to really maximize his potential. And I think when you look at what Caleb Williams can do with the weapons that are already at his disposal, obviously there are things that need to be tweaked from a roster standpoint, but I think that schematically, what we think that he's going to do, if you're going to project what he's done the last 2 or 3 seasons in Detroit, you project that forward. Things are going to be a lot easier for Caleb Williams, things that he's going to be able to manage both pre and post snap. I think there will be more answers for him in this offense versus what we saw here in year number 1 in Chicago.
Fran, everybody wants to know about Will Campbell and the Bears with left tackle needs, but it's not they have to have. They could leave Braxton Jones there. How do you look at that part of the equation?
Yeah, I like Will Campbell a lot. I think he's just rock solid across the board. When I watched him last May for the first time, so going off of his sophomore film, this was a player that I just felt just checked all of the boxes, and maybe he didn't have that one A+ trait, but along the offensive line, I think that's perfectly fine if you are really good across the board. And that is how I view Will Campbell. I think the one thing that people are going to have questions about, and I do think that it could come up with Ryan Poles and this front office, is what does that arm length look like? What is that number going to be? Because, that is something, and I know that was a big thing for Matt Eberflus, and, Ryan Poles has echoed that in years past. Is that something that they are okay to kind of back off of? How much will the offensive line coach and the offensive coordinator impact that in terms of how long they want those guys along the offensive line and certainly at tackle? But I think when you look at Will Campbell, there's a lot to like from an athleticism standpoint, from a strength standpoint, from a power standpoint. He's much more powerful than a guy that you would see typically at the 6'4", 310-pound range. He also, guys, I just love the fact that this guy stepped in day one as a true freshman and started in the SEC. And typically when you see that and you go to PFF or whatever tracking metric, service you want to look at, usually that first year is rough for those freshman offensive linemen. They're giving up lots of sacks, lots of pressures tallied against them. That was not the case for Will Campbell. This is a guy that's been a 3-year starter, has done a really good job anchoring that LSU offensive line on the left side. Some people question whether or not he could stick there, but I think when you look at Braxton Jones, he's built similarly. I said that in my mock draft this week that Kelvin Banks Jr., you would also have those same questions about, and I think those guys have similar builds and are going to have similar questions moving forward, but I really like Will Campbell. Right now, he's my favorite tackle in this draft.
Hit the like button for Fran Duffy, for Jake Rietma, for Field Yates, for the CHGO Bears Podcast. If you're just checking us out, we're Monday through Friday at noon. Today we're going 2 hours, baby, to celebrate Ben Johnson. Now to you, Gregory.
Yeah, for sure, Fran. I'm looking forward to learning everything that you're bringing here to the AllCity network and your draft coverage here. So when sticking with tackles, looking at a guy like Josh Simmons, how concerned are you to reach for him with the injury concern? I think if he had stayed healthy, would he have been at the top of your board? Because, just trying to understand this tackle solution that the Bears are trying to solve here.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. So as I've been thinking about it over the last 12 hours or so, I think that Simmons might be the best fit when he's perfectly healthy, like when thinking about Ben Johnson, I think that he might be the guy that I would be most excited about squaring in, because he is more of your prototypical left tackle, the way that he is built. He started at San Diego State, made the transfer over to Ohio State, and continued a high level of play. And I think what you see from him is that he can be a little bit more of a weapon in the run game on a consistent basis than what we've seen from Kelvin Banks Jr. And I think that that's the roller coaster of the Kelvin Banks Jr. film is a little bit worrisome to me, especially going up against some of the best competition that they faced this year. And, I watched him against Georgia. I watched him against Michigan. And I thought both of those defensive lines kind of gave Banks a little bit of trouble, especially late in games. When I look at Simmons, now it was a smaller sample size because he got hurt midseason, but I thought Simmons was lights out. And there was some a little bit reminiscent of like a Christian Darrisaw type of player. Obviously, he's been a really good player up there in the NFC North for Minnesota. But I think when you look at what he can do in the run game, this guy could be a weapon. We know that's going to be a priority for Ben Johnson in this new scheme. And so for me, looking at Josh Simmons, the ACL is going to be the big thing. Where is he at from a health standpoint, from a medical standpoint? Ryan Poles, that has been something that he hasn't necessarily trended towards too often. And you guys might, can correct me if I'm wrong. He's had 26 draft choices so far. Only 4 of those guys where I had they had some kind of questionable medical history, like a season-ending injury on their record. That's one of the higher numbers in the league, or is one of the lower numbers in the league, I should say. And really no huge medical red flags. And so they've been pretty conservative from that end of things. Now it's just going to come down to how does it look in the medical check out in Indianapolis? Is a secondary medical check going to be required? Are they going to bring him in for a visit and further look at that knee? That's going to be big here for when you look at Simmons moving forward through the process.
By the way, anybody watching this or listening to this right now should go find Fran on Twitter at FDuffyNFL. All this great draft analyst analysis, and he's, like I said, going to be joining us between now and the draft regularly. Fran, because I want our viewers and listeners kind of get to know you, your background a little bit. Can you kind of share just your background with scouting and this? I mean, you'll understand why Fran's our guy here between now and the draft.
Yeah, I got hooked in the draft back in the 1999 draft, guys, and that was I'm a local here to Philadelphia, so growing up as an Eagles fan, the draft that year for the Eagles, they had the number 2 pick, and it was coming down to should they take the running back Ricky Williams or the Chicago native, the Syracuse quarterback, Donovan McNabb. And they ended up going with McNabb. And from that point on, all the discourse around that draft kind of got me hooked. And from that point on, my love for the event only grew bigger and bigger and bigger from that point on. I went to Temple University here in Philadelphia, studying broadcasting and journalism. And from that point, I started doing some freelance draft writing. Started working with the Temple football team, and then I remember my first day walking into the video office to start work there, and I saw my first glimpse of all 22. I was breaking down. It was three games of the Denver Broncos offense. I was ingesting it for our offensive coordinator at the time, and I look at him my eyes were wide open. Oh, this is now my major. I'm now majoring in football. I worked for 5 years under Al Golden and that staff with Temple, and then went from there to the Philadelphia Eagles and created a bunch of content with the Philadelphia Eagles over 14 seasons, and just left them this summer here for AllCity, and have been doing obviously a lot of Eagle stuff with PHLY, but excited for draft season to kick into gear. I've been watching these guys for this class going back to last spring. And now it's time for everybody else to sink their teeth into these players.
I mean, now that is a solid start to a career. I'm rethinking my entire life process right now listening to that, Fran. But let's not make this about me. Let's make this about the Bears and Ben and your analysis here. What do you think of James Pierce, Tennessee, if the Bears flipped over and want somebody to get to the quarterback? Because you need those to win too.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. Look, there's been a lot of whispers about this being Dennis Allen. If Dennis Allen is the defensive coordinator, I think when you look at James Pierce Jr., this is a guy that I don't want to say he's not a factor against the run, but pass rushing has been more of his bag. He's a pure high side rusher, meaning that he wants to be that speed guy on the outside, and the run game has been more secondary. I think when you look at Dennis Allen and his history, he's been much more into like the bigger crash defensive ends, right? The guys that they've prioritized, they've been more of the bigger body type. So I like a Montez Sweat fit. That type of player I think fits with what Dennis Allen has liked in the past. You think of Cam Jordan. You think when they drafted Marcus Davenport and they gave up the farm to move up for him. Those are the kinds of players that he has typically trended towards. And there are players like that in this draft. But if it were Dennis Allen, I don't love James Pierce for that fit. I think that it would be more some of these other bigger defensive ends we've seen, like a Nick Scorton, from Texas A&M. Some of those types I think might be a better fit. I'm interested to see where Pierce ultimately, how people start discussing him, because back in the summer, I mean, he was a consensus top 5 pick in like a lot of mock drafts. I personally didn't quite see that just because of the questions that I talked about in terms of what is the overall value in the run game. But I think that this is a guy that's probably going to still go in round 1 just because of what he can give you rushing the quarterback.
Fran, Bears fans might riot if they don't go with an alignment, either offensive or defensive, early. That being said, when I think about this Lions offense the last few years under Ben Johnson, there's just so much speed to go around. And one of the interesting things we've already talked about here is, DeAndre Swift was the running back in Detroit.
Yeah, I know.
Traded him to Philly, and now he's in Chicago. I don't know enough about that yet. We'll do some digging. We'll find out. But, I think running back is going to be something that we're going to be talking about a lot here over the next few months too. So just what can you tell us? Are there any obvious fits? Just I'm thinking speed. Like forget position, but just guys that kind of fit what you've seen Ben Johnson utilize in that Detroit Lions offense.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good running back class. I think obviously we have the top end talent in Ashton Jeanty. And I'm going to be honest, as I was thinking of 10 overall, I'm like, that's not completely out of the question. Then I go back. I keep notes, guys. I've kept notes for years on general manager and head coach press conferences around the NFL. And I go back to Ryan Poles' introductory press conference there in Chicago where he talked about position value. And I have the quote here where he said how valuation is very big for him and how you have to prioritize certain positions because of supply and demand and place them on the board where you can get them. And then I go and I look at his draft history and day 1 and day 2, and it's been all wide receivers, tackles, corners, pass rush, right? That's really been the core of what they've done. So I don't think that Ashton Jeanty in round 1, if they are able to plug other holes elsewhere, to your point, I think that there would probably be riots in the streets if it's not alignment of some sort. So I think when you start looking around the rest of the draft there at running back, there's going to be talent for them. And I think whether it's day 2 or even going into day 3, when you bring up speed, the guy that comes to mind is Brashard Smith, the running back from SMU. Obviously, they go to the playoff and they lose in the first round. But I think when you look at what the Mustangs did this year, they took a converted receiver from the University of Miami and they moved him over to running back. Tyrone Tracy did the same thing last year up in the Big Ten. He became a 4th-round pick of the New York Giants, had a successful rookie season. I think Brashard Smith is a more explosive version of that. This guy is all juice. He's got the ability to impact the game both as a runner and as a receiver. So that position flexibility, I think, would fit in really well with a Ben Johnson. And so that would be a name, certainly, especially we know that Ryan Poles, he'll dig into the Senior Bowl ranks. He's a guy that I think will be there in Mobile next week, so I'll get eyes on him in person. But Brashard Smith, the running back from SMU, is certainly a name to keep an eye on.
All right, you want to be a CHGO diehard to get all the insight, everything you get here with Fran over the next few months. We're going to have him here on the show every week. But the database, everything he's giving you right now that's in his head and he's reading off his computer, we have our draft database that's going to be available to diehards. I think we're really close to launching it. So, yeah, sign up. The information's already insane. Every time I check it, it's so good. So we're hear a lot from Fran coming up here, and he's going to be in Mobile next week. So we'll check in again.
We got the next 2.5 months, right? So I'll have time to sway Fran into Ashton Jeanty.
Well, everybody wants Scattaboo. It's a lot of Scattaboo out there.
Yeah. Well,
all 32 teams, all 32 fan bases all think Scattaboo's their guy in round 4.
Yeah.
I just like triggering our chat. So
we got plenty of time to trigger people about the draft. Fran, thank you so much, man. Talk soon.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
We all silly like the mayor.